So I think maybe one thing that would be really nice to start with would be just to help us get a sense of what design means. What do we mean when we talk about design in the startup context? Maybe Dheeraj, would you like to start?
Hello. First of all, thanks for giving us this opportunity. I feel like you all should be on stage. I'm humbled by everybody that I've met today. So design, I'll describe it in a second, but I think design is a tough thing to describe in words, partly because we all have a preconceived notion of what design is. Right? When we think of design, we think of aesthetic, we think of something that looks good. But the way we keep talking about design, the way Rajesh was talking about design, the way the speaker before us was talking about design, it's much deeper than that, right? It's actually about finding what the meaning is behind what you're doing. Another bit is, what a designer does and what design is all about is actually taking what a good designer does and applying it to other things. Let me clarify what I mean. So if you take this iPhone, right? If somebody came to me 5 or 10 years ago and said, help me design the next iPhone as a customer, I would have at best been able to design a better BlackBerry, right? But what's a good designer did, and leave aside Steve Jobs for a second, right? He was God, he was somebody else, but a normal designer, what they would be expected to do is come to me as a user and figure out what's going on inside my head without me actually being able to verbalize it. So they'd be able to, figure out that, a touch screen would work. This pinching motion would be okay, that if I flip the phone like this, the image should flip with me. And they should be able to understand that and be able to bring that out of me. And to me, that's what design is all about. That's what a good designer is all about. It's basically getting inside the user's head and taking out what he or she can't even tell you. And I think that's the real power of design. And that then can be applied to anything, right? It can obviously be applied to products, but you can also use that to design, what a conference should feel like. What obviously the tactile feeling of a brochure should feel like, what an experience should feel like, and in some cases what a business should offer as its value proposition. I've used that personally in the different ventures that I've been involved with, including Aroga Finance, which I'll get into in a second. But for now, I'll pass the mic on to somebody else.
Who wants to take the question?
Yeah, so look, I think as Sandeep mentioned before as well, I think it's great that design has taken such an important part of this conference and the conversation around product and how we actually think about user experience. And for me, design has been more than just the UI on the site. It's been actually the entire user experience with your product. And I think we've seen, as an investor, I've had a chance to see 2 companies in our portfolio do a great job of it. One is Cleartrip that Sandeep talked about, and the other was Zoom In, which actually sells physical product. And I think when you start to think about it beyond just the idea of, okay, there's a website, there's how a guy navigates on it and how the colors are, it's really also about how does your customer service function? Is it consistent with the message of what your business is proposing in terms of the UI that you've created? If you've made it simple and you have to call a call center and go through multiple hurdles to be able to get your question answered, that's a bit of a challenge. If your premise is that we're quick and we give you service fast, then your entire experience needs to be that. So whether it's been in how we've looked at our packaging design in Zoom In and making sure that we use the right types of products that are consistent with the message that we have in the site there, or whether it's been a Cleartrip. And I think one of the interesting things on the design aspect is, and Rush, who's a co-founder with us at Cleartrip, was one of the people that banged this into my head at the beginning. It's not a consensus game. And either people are going to love it or hate it. And that's fine. And his answer was, I'd rather people actually hate it than be indifferent. And I think that thought is pretty interesting when you start to say, okay, look, how many people are going to get in the room and make a decision on whether the logo should be yellow, blue, or green, or even what the name should be? Trust in someone, go with it, and try to build from there, and then try to stay consistent with it. On the negative side, at Cleartrip, for example, at the beginning, we did a terrible job in our marketing communication in comparison to what our brand premise was. We designed a site that was simple and easy to use, yet we were doing marketing the way everybody else was doing it, with cluttered ads and chaos, and it was just wrong. And I think over the last 2 to 3 years, we've understood that, and I think it's made a big difference in terms of people's understanding of what we are as a brand as well. So to the extent you're building a consumer brand, I think thinking about the design across all of these aspects, operations, finance, marketing, everything, it becomes really important.
So actually, one thing that you just said reminds me of one of the GSF portfolio companies in this batch. They're called Ride and Go. You'll hear from them later. And they're a ride-sharing company based in Bangalore, helping people carpool together. And one of the things that they've had to figure out is that their user experience is not just people actually interacting with their product on their computer or on their mobile phone. It goes deeper than that to their experience of meeting the person that they're carpooling with, of actually traveling from home to work and back. So figuring out that design is not just how it looks, it's not even just how it works, it really can be fundamentally integrated into your entire thinking about the business. So I think on that note, maybe can we talk a little bit about design as competitive advantage? There are a lot of entrepreneurs in the room, some of whom really believe in the power for design to give them some real competitive advantage, but I can't speak for all of them. But I am hoping that by the end of this session, they all are leaving looking for a design co-founder, or at least believe that. So maybe, Alok, could you talk a little bit about the ways in which design can give a company competitive advantage?
Sure. I just want to link it to the last question you were asking us. Why is design important for me, right? I'm an investor, right? Ultimately, the business is delivering results. That's great. I think to me, design is a manifestation of how the team is thinking about a business, right? It is clarity of thought regarding who your customer is. What is your unique proposition to them, right? And how uncluttered that thought process is, which finally reflects in design. If I, as a business leader or as a product manager, have briefed my designer to say, these are the 15 functionalities I want on this page, you're dead on arrival, right? So I think the reason why I care about design when a company walks in and presents their prototype to me is because it reflects how cluttered or how clear their thought process is regarding their entire business. And to me, the notion of competitive advantage in design, again, comes back to the same issue of, are you focused enough on some use cases which you think you can win, on some customers you think are your core customers rather than all the world, and on certain functionality that you believe you're going to excel at, which good design showcases to me. And to me, that is the source of competitive advantage, right? I think the notion of optimizing usage funnels, maximizing conversion rates, those are fairly scientific processes that one can take good design through, one can take bad design through. But it is the clarity of thought process that a good design communicates, which really, as an investor, is important for me when a team comes in and speaks to us.
So where are we? What is the state of design in India? Do we have enough designers? Is there a shortage of talent? I think we can all safely assume that there's a lot of engineering talent in India. Is there enough design talent to match? Or do we need to start by investing in institutions and creating this talent pool? Or is it there and it's just not being funneled in this direction? Maybe Elroy, because you work at a design agency, you can give it are all the designers working in agencies? Why aren't they founding companies?
So let me start off from the first discussion we had. As somebody who's interested in design, and I am not a designer, so I have no skills to design, but I can think design. And I also am a founder of a company, and I can actually bear testament to the worth the design has for a company, right? So taking off from where, forget your name, but no, not Dheeraj. Sorry, you? Alok, moved on from. If you have good design and you really believe your design, it solves your cost of HR. Because your internal people who work for you, they understand what you're trying to build. If you have good design, you solve your marketing problems. Because you have a starting point of conversation, you have people who sort of cling on to you, you have to reduce on after sales. So as a startup person, and as especially people in the tech space, I think design really sort of connects at every level. And if we leave design open enough, you can sort of get business intelligence. So you don't have to pay too much for consultancy. You don't have to pay too much, to get reports. If you leave your design, especially in the tech space, open enough and enough to a lot of evolution, you can get a lot of understanding and feeling from what's happening. And then to answer whether we have enough designers in India, yes, we are known as a crafty race. We've always, been very good in jewelry design, in textures, in paintings, in art. But I think where design has reached now is we need to break off from traditions. And if you look at designers in India, at least in my experience, it's difficult for us to break off from traditions because all through our primary education, I think the focus has been on comparative advantage, right? And subjectivity has no space in the kind of human beings we're molded into. To give you a small example, if I was in a primary school and I drew a sun behind, a family portrait, and if the sun was behind my mom's head, I was told that the sun needs to be in the sky. But, the same thing when I sort of interacted with my nephews in the US, the teacher would go up to them and say, oh, are you putting the sun behind your mom because she's the one that brings warmth into your family? And I think if we start breaking off from comparative advantages in primary schools, in formative years of our lives, I think we can develop more designers in India. Yeah, that's what I think.
Joss, does any of that resonate with you? I know we were talking about something like that earlier.
It does, because can you hear me? Because we're working with about 20, 25 artists, visual artists, who are, half of them are designers at agencies that we've found. We've looked at about almost 300 visual artists around the world of Indian origin. And we've brought it down to about 20 that we've curated. Because we have themes, we want them to be able to start thinking and not just creating beautiful art that's decorative. So we have themes and concepts that we want to bring out of their art. So it's a conceptual thing. And the art that's coming out, the design that's coming out is really clever and just intelligent. And so there's a story behind it, and that's exactly what we're looking for. It's a deeper story within the design and the art. So we do have quite a few talented people in India, and some of them live abroad, have moved abroad or grew up abroad. But there's hope, and we're still looking for more of these artists. But the ones that we've found so far are just pretty phenomenal. So I have a lot of hope.
Just to take a little bit of a historical perspective on this, and I'm not a designer again, and I'm just going to limit myself to website, mobile, those kind of designs, right? Those kind of designs that I see. So if you look at the Gen 1 entrepreneurs on the internet in India, I'm one of the culprits. There are several of my kind of colleagues sitting out here. By 2005, 2006, we reached a conclusion that the Indian consumer wants clutter. It was an incorrect conclusion, right? But we put that on the pedestal. Rajesh, I think you were one of the culprits with us through the India Times journey there, right? So if you look at all the 99, 2000 entrepreneurs, their sites will still look cluttered, right? Because this whole notion of India is a bazaar. It's not a clean alley where you go and shop, right? So if you look at Big Bazaar, as a retail business, they followed the same design sensibility, right? I think today when I look at the design of sites that have come up in the last 4 or 5 years, I see a lot of clarity. There's no clutter in there. So in some sense, we are kind of catching up with the global norm. of saying, design has its roots in usability. Let's make that simple. Let's be clear about what we want the user to do here. The part that I find missing is, we haven't married the global standards of design with what is going to be the Indian sensibility. And if I again take an example from the art world, there we found it. Right? There are several of Indian designers, artists, who today would still sit on the world stage, be recognized as globally competitive, but have their unique style. I think that is one missing piece that I look for of saying, what is interactive design from India going to look like, not compromising on any of the simplicity and functionality, right? But what's that flavor? And to me, that's still something which is out there in the future. I haven't seen that come up.
So the identity is there, the creativity in India is here, but you're saying, I think if I hear you correctly, you're saying that it can't just be about catching up to global design standards, that there should be something that in order for India to take like a global leadership role in design innovation, there has to be something uniquely Indian about it.
That's my belief. And I don't think
what does that look like to you?
Sorry?
What does that look like to you? How does that work? How does that happen? What is it about India that can provide that opportunity?
You and I have had a chat around this before, right? So there's this whole notion of mobile app design. And again, that was a curve where we, in India probably started off late because a lot of what we were using feature phones, the smartphone development, the mobile first applications, if you will, right? And again, I think it's places like San Francisco that have taken the early lead in that design sensibility of saying how to create a mobile first application. But if you kind of step back and think about mobile first applications versus mobile first consumers, right? I think that takes you in a different direction, right?
What's a mobile first consumer?
So a person sitting in San Francisco using an iPad application might be doing that on the mobile first. That application might not exist on the web, but he's still very familiar with the design paradigms of the web, right? You can leverage that. A person who's using his social network for the first time on the mobile and has no access to the web, has never had any access to the web, will look at the same application very differently. One thing in my mind that changes immediately is how bespoke are you versus how integrated are you in terms of functionality that you provide. Right? Now that model of design is not available today. I think that's waiting to be discovered. Right? Step one, step further backwards, the notion of how apps interact with each other, the architecture is broken. Right? The one thing that we did well in the web was hypertext, linkages across pages. There's still no paradigm to have linkages across applications. As you get to more integrated application experiences, how will that behave? There are problems of that nature that are waiting to be solved, which are going to be extremely important for markets like India, where a bulk of mobile users would have never seen the web. So I kind of differentiate between the mobile first consumer. I think their requirements are going to be fundamentally different from mobile first applications, which is, I know how the web functions and I can deal with this application as my bridge to the web.
So if I hear what you're saying, there's this idea of the mobile first consumer and the mobile first company, and there are mobile first companies all over the place. Like maybe Instagram is a very obvious mobile first company. That's product was initially mobile, but Instagram was designed for American users who were already familiar with desktop user experiences. But there's this whole new consumer base of mobile-first consumers who can think and interact with a mobile product differently. Like, Dheeraj, what do you think about this?
I love it, but honestly, I'm getting a bit overwhelmed. It's very exciting. Let me try to put what you said in slightly different words. And go back to the question that you asked earlier about enough designers in India. So I think when you think about design, I think we're all sort of alluding to this earlier, you have to separate out two things, right? One is the philosophy, the process of design, right? That is how people think. And that is separate than the craft that was alluded to earlier. Right? If I look at the process of design, the philosophy, the way people think, I think that exists in India. Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at any good entrepreneur, they sort of have that innately. But because to be successful, you have to, again, logically assume that you're giving customers what they want, hence they're buying what you're giving them. Hence you're understanding what they want, right? Probably, right? So that way, I think that exists in India. I think it's the depth of craft which you're talking about in the mobile web, right? The approach side, that understanding I think does exist. And I think the same holds true for mobile first, right? Where people are, I think, thinking about things in a right way, but maybe they're just not able to execute it because maybe the level of expertise or that craft is just not present.
So what do you think about like if India is not just playing catch up to global standards, if Indian entrepreneurs can really create can really move the needle, be really pushing the boundaries of design innovation and technology. How does that happen? Is it how much is it about looking inward and solving problems that are uniquely Indian and coming up with design solutions for uniquely Indian problems? How much is it about channeling one's Indian identity or a million different Indian identities into developing an Indian sense of design? Is it, how Indian does it have to be? How global does it have to be? What's the difference?
So I think there doesn't have to be a difference, right? But if you want that Indianness to come out, I think it'll come out if you solve Indian problems. Yeah, so let me give you an example. And here I'm going to plug my company, yeah? So bear with me for a second. So I moved on from IDEO, founded a company a couple of years ago called Arogya Finance. Yeah, it's a company where we lend to people. So you're thinking now ICICI, HDFC, Citibank, whatever bank in other country that you're from. But the one thing when you go out in the market, you quickly realize about India is that none of the infrastructure that the banking sector relies on exists in India. Right? So there is no credit history for every single person. There's no social security number for every single person. Not everybody has a bank account. Not everybody has collateral to offer you. Right? So this is the constraint that is India. And then if you design a solution within that, and if it can work within those constraints, that's super exciting. Right? And that's what we're trying to do at Arogya too, right? So we've developed our own risk analysis approach, which doesn't rely on any of that stuff to figure out whether you're a risky candidate or not. And then we lend to you. We've been doing that for the last few years. We've got some things wrong, some things right. But I think that's where, again, I'm plugging myself, so I apologize for that. But I think that's where some of this is going to come from, right? Is you look at the constraints that are Indian, you design for that context, and once you do that, man, it's super powerful, right? So the way I talk to my friends in the US now, right? If two people, so let's say Alok and I, have the exact same, so in the US, the way it works is everybody gets a credit score. Yeah, so if both of us have the exact same credit score, a bank would lend to us under the exact same terms. Yeah, assuming he makes 10 times as much as I do, which is probably true. They may give him a loan 10 times larger than me, right? But everything else stays the same. But that's the most retarded way of looking at a risk, right? I mean, there's nothing similar about us. He has a stable job, I have anything but, right? I mean, he's been there, done that, sold successful companies. I've never succeeded in that way before. So we're two very different people. So you solve something within constraints for India, and all of a sudden, you can actually start a global movement if you fuel from that. So I think that's the way to do it. That you take the process, you take this expertise, you apply it to the Indian system with the constraints that exist, and if you can crack that, man, I mean, if you go to other countries, the constraints, if anything, are just, there are fewer constraints, so you'll probably do better. And I think that's what Lizzie's trying to do too with Wonga.
So then, it seems that in order to make that happen, more startups in India need to have designers as founders.
Yeah, and I think more investors need to be in the audience so they understand. And my friends here, my Wharton alum here, we need to really hammer into their heads that you got to trust this and you got to invest in people who follow a methodology like this and work with them.
Sandeep, I'd love it if you could weigh in on this designer-founder thing.
Yeah, actually, so I actually think it's the market will solve the problem to a degree, in the sense that, look, design is not and I get very frustrated with this because we invest in consumer tech companies that blow up a lot of money on advertising. And you talk about brand, and you talk about this, and I sit there and say, okay, how do you quantify this? And how do you quantify all the investment that you're making in these different places? And I think when you start to actually look at it, and you look at distribution companies, if you distribute a product, again, like Cleartrip does, for example, you ultimately, let's assume everybody gets the same margin in the world. You know, the supplier is going to pay everyone pretty much the same thing. What you can really differentiate on is your cost of customer acquisition, your ability to retain a customer, and your cost of fulfillment. Those three things are actually driven by your product and your entire experience around it. When I say product, I loop in what I was saying before in terms of your offline experience that you provide, everything. And so that all comes to design, that all comes to brand, that all comes to investments that can actually be measured in terms of their value to the business overall. So I think that the more we as, I guess, investors, entrepreneurs, people involved in leading and growing these companies start to adopt the idea that, look, we're gonna decide that, like Alok said before, it used to be that was what the customer wanted was the crazy chaotic mentality. So you did that because you thought that that would result in revenue and profit and growth and everything. Today, if you start to realize that actually what drives revenue and profit and growth is a better approach to user experience in its entirety, which means information architecture, customer support, the whole thing, design, then I think you'll start to get people who want to build for that and think like that. I think we did that at the beginning at Cleartrip, very early on. We were able to attract people like Sunit to come in and actually take care of that and continue to build upon it. I think that if we continue to build companies with those metrics in mind, I think you'll start to get designers who'll start to think that way, and you'll start to create the right answer. I don't think it's not a focused, okay, let's build 5 schools and grow it. It's let's decide that this is what matters, and then let's build companies that way.
So, there are a number of people on this couch with you who either currently work in a design agency or have in the past. And I'm interested in the kind of difference between working with, in a consulting arrangement with a creative agency versus, example like Cleartrip, where there is a very strong designer founder. Like, how, as an entrepreneur, how do I make the decision, about whether or not I need a designer as a founder of my company, or are there other ways for me to start a company that is, that designs good products, and that, is it possible for me to integrate design into my business really effectively if I don't have a designer as a co-founder?
I'll stick with that first. Look, again, I don't think you need a designer as a founder. I think you need a mindset of caring about user experience in its entirety. And your business has got to have that approach that says, look, I believe that I'm going to build a great product, I'm going to build a great user experience, and I'm going to find people that are going to help me around that, and I'm going to have a philosophy that inculcates that across the board. So your tech guy thinks about it, your finance guy thinks about it, your ops guy thinks about it. Everyone believes that the customer experience is paramount. And so you don't have to hire a co-founder who's a designer. You just have to develop that mindset and then learn a lot about it. I think you absolutely, if you don't know design, you have to understand what user experience means. I definitely didn't know it. I think I had the benefit of working with some really smart people who taught me a lot about it. And I think that as a result, if you can carry that forward through the organization, it will then permeate everywhere. And I think that's that's what you're really hoping for. A silver bullet is not the answer.
We have time for
so I think just to add to that, I think it's also a question of when you say designer as a founder, who do you call the designer, right? There's a product management function, which to me is the integrative function on what the customer experience should be, right? There's often a notion of that art director being the designer, right? And certainly in that notion, it's not, it's incongruous with saying you need the art director. So you can go a variety of steps between the product management function right to the point of design implementation.
I've actually got a comment and a question. I wanted to respond to what Alok was talking about in terms of unique identity of Indian design. And I personally think that we had one and we've kind of lost it somewhere, right? So if you go back to ancient India, one of the things that you note is that the houses, and that's a great example to look at for design identity, were very harmonious with nature, right? And I think for a long time, India's identity of design was being in harmony with nature. And somewhere along the way, we've completely lost it, if you look at our cities or any of our products. And I don't know if a new one's going to emerge now, but we probably have to, rediscover that. And we probably lost it to Steve Jobs, who kind of came here and took it back with him and, showed us how to swipe and slide and so on. But having said that, I think my question really was more around product design. I think we've spoken philosophically about design. But when it comes to product design, which is, essentially goods and services we consume, do you guys think that India is pretty much doomed, or we've sort of got a shot here? Because I don't really see us, let's just move away from the web and mobile, look at our cars, or look at various aspects of the various goods and services we consume. And just wondering what you guys think on that topic.
Actually, I want to supplement that question with a question, and maybe that question is for you, right? A lot of design activity that we are talking about here is interface design, software, services, and so on. Do you need to have a strong product design ecosystem, right? I'm not talking about products as in software products. I'm talking about this bottle of water. In order to then bring that design sensibility into software products, right? And markets like, again, I don't think US is a market, but San Francisco have that, right? IDEO does that all the time, right? What is the linkage that you see between those two elements rather than just trying on a software trail without ever fixing the hardware?
Question that is a little, for the visual, because we work with visual designers, and our co-partner, he is a product, he has been working in product design recently because he's working on our products. I think it's just because you have to be a creator of a blueprint, you have to think again like what those users are. So they may not be interface users, but how are they going to use it? Our products, we're also designing them for an more intelligent, consumer of today. We consider our consumers today more intelligent because they're more socially conscious and environmentally conscious. So all our products that our packaging, that our T-shirts come in and our art prints come in, that's all. The packaging can be repurposed for something else. And it's environmentally friendly. So we're thinking about those things as well, and how can we create that product into something else, and it be used to package other things. So even as for our company, how can we reuse it and how can we repurpose it? But then also for the user, the end user, how can they repurpose it? So we're thinking about their lifestyle, their daily habits, things like that.
I'm sorry if I hijacked your question, but I thought you were partly going towards saying, are we really getting ahead of the pack or are we just following?
I mean, we're just so way behind in terms of product and service design. Any item you pick up that you consume on a day-to-day basis it's clunky, right? And I just wonder if that's a race worth even trying to win versus simply adopting what somebody else is doing very well.
I think the unique challenge and the interesting part for designers, when it comes to your example of us building homes that sort of mingled with nature, right? So that's harmony, right? We as a society have always been value driven, right? So if we as designers sort of pull back and say, okay, let's bring harmony to our design. Let's bring value into our design. And of course, we can't afford to be very aloof from the design trends that are happening in the Western world, because we interact with products that they make and we interact with products that are made in India, right? And so we can't really have disparate sort of experiences. So if we take the good, so whether it be Swedish design, which is open, flat, white, and we add it to value-driven sort of philosophy that we have, craftiness that we possess, I think we can own a certain space rather than trying to really differentiate from sort of the trends that are going on globally. Because I think that's a battle that we can't win, and we don't need to fight. Because what I'm using here, someone in San Francisco is using too. You know, because technology sort of democratization of, you know, the entire society. So I think we just need to add stuff like value, harmony, and sort of think through how we can bring that out through our design and, you know, add that layer. And that could be the design sensibility that India owns.
So we really have run out of time, but it is a thought that I want to bring